Good evening, everyone. I'm Erik Belhuisen, and this is Alison. Well, she'll get a chance to introduce herself later on. My background is as a physicist, and I spent most of my life working in the oil industry as a petroleum engineer and various other engineering kind of things. And so climate change pretty much passed me by until 2012, when I had the good fortune to be in a senior technical role on a big government-funded carbon storage project. And when we finished the project, I got to thinking, because the project was a really weird project, it didn't have a timeline, and I thought, well, if carbon storage is about the climate, then surely there must be a timeline. So I spent 6 weeks full-time in my own time studying climate change to try and find out what the situation was with the climate. And yeah, okay, it was in for quite a shock. So that was the beginning of my climate activism. And I was just be talking to colleagues and stuff like that and trying to push things along. And then one day in 2014, a mutual friend of Alison and myself, a colleague of mine, a drilling engineer, we were all following the Avaz updates. I'm sure you've heard of Avaz, online environmental lobbying network. Very big.
AVAAZ.
AVAAZ. Very interesting organization to keep track of. Anyway, and they were looking for people who were prepared to organize a demonstration in the lead up to the Paris Climate Conference. And I came across that invitation and I thought, we really need one, but I've never done anything like that. And I believe that Alison had a similar kind of response, except that Alison said, I've never done it before, so why not? Anyway, so we got together and that's how we met and organized what was a demonstration, our first demonstration. We had over 20 people in Aberdeen on the streets with a banner, which I guess now is a really small climate demonstration. But in those days, at least for us, was the first thing we did. Our focus was on creating awareness and a little bit of education, basically get climate change in the conversation. And remember, this was in 2014 time, and there was a lot less understanding, a lot less alignment on climate action than there is now. And that's how we ended up organizing kind of small events that would get exposure, and that came into Climate Week, which we set up again in the Northeast because, well, there was no Climate Week here. And we ended up picking our own date because we had the freedom to do that.
Do you remember it though? It was actually Climate Week across the UK just for that 1 year.
There were Climate Weeks, there were kind of Climate Weeks. There had been, but
the end of March,
So we did that, kind of tied into Earth Hour because that was something which was on the calendar. And the idea of Climate Week was, again, awareness. So the idea is that if you have a number of events at the same time, that random passersby will have to see something related to climate change. That was the core thought. As long as we can get lots of events which in one way or another touch on climate change, that will hopefully get the conversation going. And that's what we did for the first year and a half, too.
Yeah, I mean, we basically went in and co-opted Earth Hour from the council. With a few of them were just simply doing light switch offs for Earth Hour, and then we kind of brought in the Climate Week aspect, and then the council said we haven't got enough resources to take this further, so we took it on and ran with it, basically. And we're really lucky that the library and the Belmont and other kind of key institutions in Aberdeen really supported Climate Week, and local artists as well, because our very first kind of event was a photo competition in the Belmont basement, and a brilliant local artist, Addy, gave us a print for the winner, and then that kind of ties into when we went to COP as well, which we'll come on to later. So yeah.
Anyway, and then I won't say I left, but I spent some time in a different country, and Alison took over. Alison left her job at the university. and you ended up focusing more on climate cafes, starting them up.
Yeah, I mean, we had when it was for a few years, we only had a couple of volunteers. And then we got some amazing volunteers that are with us today, you know, Rachel and Javi and Adam and Bob and Kai, and it all came, it was quite a few of us. And then we finally had some resources and we put on the very first climate cafe and invited like Donald and everything from Huntley from the wind farm and Donside Hydro and everything. Our very first climate cafe in the Waterstones when it was on Union Street, and it was amazing. And we used to have like 100, 120, I think 180 to 100 was a norm when we first started, and it really started to be a haven for people who'd come in from as far away as Huntley every month just because they were the only environmentalists in the village, as it were. And so it was really there that people gained a feeling of solidarity and help. And from that, Climate Week grew and grew and grew. And so did other connections and stuff. And we still go with the Climate Cafe today. And I think we're gonna maybe pass on
again
to
next.
Bob.
Okay, thanks. Adam suggested I give a wee resume of what I did at work and what I did in ACA. And so I think I just at work, if you've got an institution, which is a big organization, it makes things a hell of a lot easier. But basically, I was asked in 1986, I was asked if I would produce this leaflet on wind generators and farms. Now, I joined the college 14 years before, and there've been these events like Limits to Growth that were brought up by Meadows people who were modelers, and there was Ernest, what's his name? Zach, son of Zach, I forget what his name. Anyway, there were these publications which were on the go, and they were saying that we got finite resources and we're going to we can't carry on using up oil and using up coal and all the rest. We've got to do something about this. And it struck home with me. There's like a series of conferences on in the zoology department that were startling, and so it's a real sort of turn on to me, or turn off, I should say. So what I found, though, that in my colleagues and so on at the college, nobody would take this seriously. They got fed up with me, and, you can't go back to horses and cats and so on. And so this was a real turn off. So I was sort of fighting in the wind for 14 years. And then the phone went and the assistant principal said, we need a leaflet on wind farms, on wind generators on farms. And so we got a bit of a start. And there were two wind generators of any size at the time, and one in Orkney. And I got the data from there and put it into this leaflet. And it was quite, it went very well. But we had an organization, the college, all I did was write the thing. It went into their publishing department. They had all the contacts. It was circulated worldwide. And so it was easy. Unfortunately in ACA, we don't have that type of mechanism. Anyway, so that was the first thing. I did some work with the forestry department after that on wood chip drying, because if you had wood chips, one of the things they do is to compost. So we had to try to get them not to compost and disappear. And then I contacted Aberdeenshire Council and said you should be composting your waste. They said, well, we'd like to do that. And so I got a report to do for that. And it didn't work well. They wanted to compost bottles and glass and everything all together. I wanted to have it separated, but they weren't happy. And in a way, they were right, because if they'd done the separation that I wanted, it wouldn't have been afforded. And so they wouldn't have gone ahead with it. But and then we got approached by Grant Keenan, and he said he was wanting to start a garden waste composting system. And I said, well, I'll give my help. And we got students involved, and we did a project. And so it went well. But I did say to him, I said, if you want to make £1 million or more than 1 million, you should start food waste. Well, I didn't seem very keen on the idea. Anyway, the other thing, we helped a company, Scottish Recycling in Aberdeen, which was starting a plastic fence post making business. I was asked by Aberdeen City Council to work on that, and unfortunately went bust within 2 weeks of my help. It went bust. I like to think it wasn't just my input, but anyway, I said, you've given me the money, let's produce this report, starting a waste plastics business. And the report was produced, the number of people I got to read it, they said it was too negative. And it was had a wrong slant in it. And one person who actually ran a plastic manufacturing company said it was too optimistic. Really, so I think the impact of that report has been to put off people from recycling waste. So that's why it's all gone abroad and the scams that have been linked. Well, after retirement, well, in fact, I started before retirement, I started teaching an MSc course on waste reduction and recycling through a combination of SIUC and Edinburgh University in Edinburgh. And it was a very popular course. And we had about between 25 and then they opened it to more, so about 35 students in the course. And suddenly I found I had this huge lot of researchers at my fingertips, because I got them all to do their projects on subjects I was interested in, and they gave me all this information. I had to read it, of course, so that's the downside. But it was a really useful resource. One of the students was, believe it or not, an avocado farmer from Chile, and he was coming to do an MSc. So he said he'd like to learn about composting. So I said, well, I tell you what, why not you do a study on Grant Keenan to do food waste composting? So he did that, and he produced a thesis, and this is the thesis, and this is Grant Keenan. I sent a copy to Grant, and he got 5 copies of this, and he gave it to this banker, this economic development person who's working with, so on. So he got them all in gold, and then he started the food waste composting system, and he's gone on. He's doing quite well now. I think he's now been taken over, but I'm not taken over. He's joining forces with BIFA. Now I help Adam with climate cafes. I've insulated my granite house, which is just about finished. I'm hoping the next phase is the ground source heat pump. And I've got a system in my garden, which is an environmental pest control system for city-based organic farming, because there's so many pests and things in gardens that actually it's very difficult to grow vegetables organically without, you need sprays. I just thought you might be interested in that this is a product of my garden today. So it does work, The last thing I'm working on at the moment is this spreader here. And the thing is, for bacteria and fungi and microorganisms, they need food to be chopped up to them. You're getting rid of your all your rubbish in the garden, but it needs to be chopped up. It's like your 2-year-old child. You need to chop everything up and then you can eat it. And microorganisms have the same thing. So you need a shredder and shredders to shred biodegradable plastic bags are not easy to work.
أنا not preoccupato.
And this is a Chinese shredder being modified into British shredding floor.
No.
Vale, perfecto, pues suena.
Maybe that was-
Vale, mira, aquí está la dos. Azote y cosas nuevas. Estas son las nuevas.
Just my last point, you know, it was great having SEC and Emory University as a backup. And so big organizations are hugely valuable. You know, when I look at ACA, and I think these NESCAN asks are fantastic, but it all depends on communities developing and, you know, coming into sort of possibly businesses, whatever, I don't know. But it's very difficult. In agriculture, co-ops were very difficult to get going. And an entrepreneur like Grant Keenan, you know, he had a fire in his belly that, you know, drove everything. You know, my students, I said to my students, is this guy going to succeed? They all said, yes. He just had that drive. So I think we've got to have some way of getting sort of energy into you know, into development, because I think communities have great potential, but I think we've got to somehow energize them. And if we're going to wait for Britain or the government to give, you know, they're so keen on let the market decide and all this stuff, but they don't want to be the nanny state and tell people what to do. So I think we've got a challenge with HCA. Okay,
Thank you, Bob. We're going to move on to Yuvasree.
Hi everyone. I hope everybody in the back can hear me. Thank you. Hi. So I'm Yuvasree. I'm from the southern part of India. So my background is I'm a lawyer. I've been a certified lawyer in India. And what got me into climate action in the first place is that while I was working back home as a legal executive, I was doing it in a manufacturing sector. And then my main focus was overseeing compliances, licenses, and how you can integrate ESG and sustainability initiatives into the organization. So while doing all that, one thing that more I realized was anything you see as a risk to your organization or to your community is mostly because of the climate and the environment that is being violated these days by people. So I thought more education on this would actually benefit me to contribute meaningfully to the society. So I chose Aberdeen to do my master's in law here. So I'm graduating this July, actually. I finished my master's in business law and sustainable development. Both courses were actually the university helped me in gaining deeper educational knowledge. And while I was at the university, I started volunteering as a sustainability advocate. So that's through that I got introduced to ACA and I started volunteering here. So what I saw climate action back before volunteering or understanding how the systems work was that mostly if you have the well-written policies or defined laws, rules and regulations and a clear roadmap. So I thought that would actually help. But then I've realized and learned that change usually comes through the community and people. So having an awareness and helping people understand that actually develops and we can have more green future. So I've did my internship as a sustainability and a supply chain intern at Glencraft, which is a non-profit, it's not for a profit organization, social enterprise. It has a very good, meaningful vision towards it. The vision is basically to provide work to meaningful people, people who face barriers to work through meaningful employment. That's how the vision started back in 1843 by two men in Aberdeen, and they still run with the entire organization on the same vision to till this day. It's inspiring to see how they maintain, transparent business structures and how they aim for better works. So that all made me realize that we can achieve local action through community, people having good, clear, transparent businesses, as well as having leadership at every level. So what gets me excited is mostly, learning everything through these systems and hoping to contribute better in a meaningful way for good green future. Thank you, guys.
Okay, so yeah, so I don't know how many people have ever seen me give this picture, but I took this in Bangladesh 10 years ago, maybe more. But in a way, it really sums up why I get so frustrated, why I'm motivated in the climate action area. I've been a rice geneticist since 1991. The main objective of that is to do research on the genes of rice to find out how you could make them grow more sustainably. And as an academic at a university, not only do I have to do this really cool stuff around sequencing and all of that lovely, mind-blowing stuff, you also have to train the next generation of students in concepts like sustainability. By the definition of sustainability that we use it in a modern academic sense, that means sustainable environment, sustainable socially sustainable, and as well as financially sustainable. And it's very frustrating, even in an organization like the university, when they talk about sustainability, they nearly always mean financial, not social, and not environment. And if we can't get the message across that we have to tackle all three, we are fucked. So I go to conferences. I was going to conferences for more than 20 years now, when the main keynote speaker was telling us about the impact of climate change on agriculture. And really, it's just very, very depressing to see those conferences coming back saying agriculture is going to take a massive hit if we don't get it sustainable and we don't tackle climate change. And it's pretty depressing as well when you then come back to Aberdeen and you see especially for me, it was the cars, just to see all those cars driving around, these monster cars, and you're thinking, well, people don't need them, and they just don't think about sustainability. They got no concept of it. So in 2017, I joined Aberdeen Climate Action in the big push that Alison mentioned, when loads of the people here joined. Yeah, I would say I found the place I was looking for, because I knew I needed to do something, and I found it a very nice community of people to work with. It's not just about what we're trying to do, it's about the people we're working with. So I found it a very nice community to work in. And the main things that ACA doing, of course, are as a social media activities, and our social media team aren't here, don't think. And we do a website, and one of our website team is online. So thanks, Andrew. But the biggest thing I do, with Bob's help, is we do the climate cafes, and as you now know, this is 98, so that is nearly 100 climate cafes have been done. And the one of the things we're asking at the end of this is, are we getting anywhere? I think we do it for more than one reason. We're not doing it just to get somewhere. We're doing it because we desperately feel we need to do something to feel a sense of actually acting and being a community as well. But we also learn a lot of interesting things. But the question would be, are we focusing on the right things? So I think that's all I wanted to say in my part. So we will stop recording.